Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Creative Writers and Illustrators. And I have Nandini Nayar back to discuss her latest book, The Story School. It's a middle grade novel which is published by Talking Cub. So let's find out more. So, Nandini, let's start by talking about why and what is this book all about?
Hi Shamla, thank you, for calling me again on your show. Really happy to be here. And yes, this is about the story school, and the story school is why I wrote it. It's a thinking about the importance that stories play in our lives. Because the story is about a fictional land where stories are banned and what it does to children. Because I think we never stop to consider what an integral part stories play in our lives. Everything that we need to explain, that we need to get across, it goes across so much better when you narrate it in the form of a story. So I was just thinking about that. And I also wanted very, very much to write a story set in a boarding school kind, because I've never written one. So sort of those two ideas came together, and that's how I came up with the idea for the story school, where I talk about a land where stories are banned and what happens when you have stories in you which cannot be suppressed. Like, how do you deal with it? How do children deal with a world without stories? So that is the in a very short, very concise form, the reason behind writing the story school.
Hmm. So Memo is a spontaneous storyteller, right? But in today's school scenario, you see, that storytelling is not kind of encouraged unless it's for a grade or for a contest. So where do you think, what role do you think storytelling plays in the lives of children? How important do you think it is for adults to encourage storytelling just for the happiness, just for being
Well,
happy?
so I think stories are, like I said, they can encourage you, they can inspire you, they can help you make sense of a world that temporarily seems to have lost its focus, or some kind of sane center to it. So
Mm.
in this book, when I talk about storytelling as something that is spontaneous, I'm looking at it not merely as the act of narrating a story, it's the act of creating stories. So I'm also thinking of myself and all of us authors, anyone who's ever sat down to write a story simply because that story just wouldn't shut up and sit quiet. It wanted to be let out. So of course here Memo is a storyteller, but I assume that later on, when stories are accepted, she's going to be a story writer, because you begin with telling stories whether to yourself or to the world, and then you go on to this. So I think that if you accept storytelling not merely as the process of narrating something, but rather as a process of creation, I think it's integral that our children do develop this. Not again, as a means of getting out of trouble. Like I know that at school, a lot of times children who tell stories or have imaginative accounts for what, or to explain why certain things happen, they're called storytellers, and it's not a very nice title. It's like a little, what should I say, a nasty title to explain away what they're saying. It's a way to explain their lies usually. But I think that storytelling as a skill, as is as integral as any other skill that we have. And I think that schools, if you look at this book itself, not just the kingdom, but also the schools have banned storytelling, but they do discover that each of us has the ability to narrate stories. Each of us does have it, and suppressing it is actually denying children the right to voice their own thoughts and opinions and to be creative. So in that sense, I think that even if today's schools don't consider storytelling as a thing, at least the writing, which I think, if you consider the syllabus of most schools, whether you take the CBSE, ICSE, or even the IGCSE, there is a focus on creative writing. So I
Yeah.
think somewhere people have accepted the importance of creative thinking in the lives and in the development of children. Because I
Mm.
think that when you start thinking creatively, what it actually allows you to do is imagine realities which are not your own. So it gives you the imagination to get into someone else's shoes and walk in them. And that is the beginning of this abstract idea, this abstract noun called empathy, because without empathy, there is no kindness in the world. If you can't imagine what another person is going through, you will never really have any sort of generous thought or kind or understanding thought for them. So in that sense, I do believe it is necessary for every one of us, the ability to read. Even if you can't write, the ability to read itself, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, I think that itself, develops this sense of empathy. Because for a little while you've forgotten the four walls that enclose you, you've forgotten the realities that you actually reside in, and you are part of a completely different world. And that is very important for all of us, to make sense of the world, to understand that a little kindness, a little generosity will help all of us much more than fighting or being very what should I say, prejudiced, or being or lacking the understanding. So I think that way it is necessary for us.
Yeah, I think what you said just now, they're very interesting and much needed observations. So let's talk about your relationship with food. You know, they're there. I mean, I've been reading, I read every middle grade, whatever book comes of yours. So I kind of know the journey you have with food, so it appears in a very prominent manner in the story school. It's there in the curious case of sweet and spicy sweet shop and camp sweets. Okay, so it's like कोई भी प्लॉट हो, यस यार चलो इसमें थोड़ा तड़का मारते हैं फूड की.
Because socho, you think of your own life, even in the midst of life and death, the question is, what is our next meal going to be? Isn't it? Anywhere, anytime. Sometimes I really think it is an integral part, and it can place, it is such a versatile thing, food. It can excite you, it can cheer you up, it can comfort you, it can remind you of someone and fill you with sorrow at their not being present. So I think that we don't really pay attention to the food we eat. We take it too much for granted, but it has enormous restorative powers. It has enormous powers to make you think creatively. And I think it's the most amazing thing to fill you with confidence. Being able to cook a dish well gives you a sense of confidence like no other, because you know that you can finally be independent. See, today's world, yes, you can order food and everything, but cooking something from scratch, from actually making it, it's also an act of love. You show your love for people through the food that you cook for them, through the meals that you serve and that you plan. You put in effort and thought into what you're going to make for them. Also, I think it's something that shows that you're in sync with the seasons. You're planning, chalo, it's like gajar time, so halwa to banna hai. You're like, it's there are lots of lemons in the market, which by the way I did make into lemon pickle. So just so when life gives you lots of lemons, just chop them up and put them into a pickle, or they squeeze them and make lemonade. So I think it also does all of these things, which we've kind of maybe lost sight of, because like food has become so easy, it's so easily available without working for it, that we don't any longer associate the process of creating food with pleasure or with independence or with just the joy of creation. So I think food is a very creative medium, because a lot of times I imagine, when I eat a dish, I imagine how this was created, or I think, what if I mix these things together and did it this way? So I think the creative process that we were talking about with storytelling, I think it's also relevant to cooking. And with life in general, what we call jugaad in our everyday life is actually is a very creative way of looking at life, and a very creative way of problem solving. Thoda sa dhaga and thoda sa wire and you're done, your problems are solved. So similarly, you have aloo, piyaz, tomato and chawal. So what do you make? And you come up creatively with one new dish which brings these together, and it's ready in very little time, and it's delicious. And there you have it, a creative response to all your hungry problems.
I guess we will be seeing more of food in your books.
Yes, because I think if we pause and ask ourselves, most of our lives, even if you're not cooking food, even if you're just ordering food, it is concerned with what shall we eat next, or what is our next meal going to be. You wake up and most of you are heading to the kitchen to make tea or coffee or milk for the kids. Your next question is, what is breakfast going to be? You look at our conversations, you know. So I lived for a while in Karnataka, and every morning I met my neighbor. Her first question over the wall would be, "Tindi aita?" It is about food. After lunch, you meet. Have you had lunch? You know, so or you bond over a cup of tea or coffee. So I think food is very, very important, as important as stories. So I bring the two together.
So I also noticed you've been, you know, gleaming information from the internet, from the social media. I see the connection you made, the Rani, the handbag, and the
Oh
secret.
yeah.
So you paid tribute to the Queen of England. Did that come while you were writing the story, or was it like planned much ahead?
No, it was planned much ahead. It was planned much ahead because I needed to have the Rani as someone very special. And I think that, I also wanted her, the Rani, also to learn a lesson from children, because I think as adults, we often don't realize the simple truths that children grasp so easily and so quickly. And we do need to pay attention to the children around us and what they are saying and why they are saying it. So I wanted the Rani to be that kind of an adult who has sort of shut her eyes to the reality of the world around her, because of a variety of reasons, not necessarily bad reasons, but whatever reasons. And I wanted her to open her eyes and to see this. So I was thinking about the Rani as a person, and I knew she had to be regal. And so the sari, because, I don't think that's, when you look at pictures of the queens of India, they look so amazing in their saris. So I wanted to pay tribute to that. And so I had that. And then I also knew that, but she had to be a contemporary, modern kind of Rani. So of course she had to have a handbag, so all of that sort of came in together.
What about the settings? Your recent books are not set in the cities. And what is it so charming about the towns and villages? Do you think they have potential to expand and explore the story?
So, see, the thing is, the idea of the setting of a story, both time and place, and the story itself, the question is, which comes first? Like, did the story come first, or did you decide, okay, now I'm going to write a story set in a village? I think that sort of it runs together on parallel lines, and then it sort of intersects, and that's where that story idea is born. So for the story school, for example, I knew that I wanted it in a kingdom where there wasn't going to be there were going to be these laws, and there had to be a Rani, and there had to be a prince, and all of that. So I came up with the kingdom of Songad and Achalgad, which were fictitious kingdoms. But with regards to the place that they are in, I didn't really think that I wanted it to be a village, because you don't really know where Memos lives, whether it's a city, whether it's the capital city of Songad, you don't know, because it didn't matter. What mattered to me was that Joshima's house, where she lived in. So I paid attention to that, and I wanted the school to be, again, this is the setting and the story, the plot of the story intertwining. So I wanted it to be in a place where there wouldn't be any kind of interruptions or any kind of interaction with the outside world. And therefore, this. Then I know that you're talking about also the curious case of the sweet and spicy sweet shop, which is set in a small village. There again, the intent of the story, the plot of the story decided the location. And the happiness train, again, the plot of the story, because the story is set in a little village, and the plot of the story, which is of a village which is very proud of the railway line which goes through its the village itself. It was necessary that it had to be this location, also because the setting in terms of the age was just after the independence of India became independent, when a lot of the princely states were just being incorporated into the Republic of India. So because of that, it couldn't have been a city. It wouldn't have made sense. It had to be a small village. So I don't think that I set out deciding that I'm going to write it in this. When I'm thinking of the plot of the story, when I'm thinking of what I want the story to be about, at the point where my brain stops at, okay, so where is the story going to be set? At that point, I think that I look at what I want to do in the story, and then the setting decides itself.
What about the story senses? In on one side, the school is not set in the city. It's set in a place which is kind of ancient yet modern, where the Rani with the Rani and the handbag. And on the other side, you have something as modern as the story sensor. So of course, it's not a gadget, but how did that come about?
So I wanted something which is, again, as the story itself, the story school itself, I wanted it to not be slotted into either contemporary or fantasy or historical. I wanted it to be a blend of a couple of things. So the story sensors are, in a way, there is a hint that there's maybe some kind of a magic which I haven't explained, but at the same time, there's a very logical sense to it, because when the Rani decides that she doesn't need the story sensors, she's able to sort of demote them, to call them off and make them just normal sentry. So I decided to use my writerly logic and do this, because I think that when I was a child, and Raja Rani stories were basically the Chanda Mama stories, which I was not very fond of. They always had these morals, and I didn't want that a child would read the story and feel that here is a Raja Rani story which is going to be more boring, maybe with a moral at the end, like be kind or be honest or be brave or something like that. So I wanted to blur the lines, because when you decide very firmly what this is going to be, I think that you limit yourself and your audience as well. So I blurred the lines and made it, a modern Rani, but at the same time limited in other ways, but at the same time open in others. So I think as all of us are like that, we may appear very modern in certain ways, but certain things we are what others would term as very conservative, maybe maybe even stick in the muds. So I think that is the reality that is portrayed in this story.
Yeah, we're all trying to be, you know, uh, I think our best, mixing the traditions and yet trying to
Yes,
be modern.
because you can't survive otherwise. If you choose to be either one way or the other, I think you're limiting yourself. Like I said, you're also denying yourself a lot of opportunities, that you could otherwise benefit from. So even with storytelling, even with story writing and plotting and planning, I think that I didn't want to limit myself to just one kind of a story. Having the Rajarani background is amazing, because it gives you the chance to talk about so many things, to explain so many things, but at the same time I didn't want that to limit what happened in my story.
Mm. So, let's talk about the characters, be it Prince Parash, Ranima, Joshima. So, which of these characters were very difficult to create? Because, it's not easy creating different. I mean, you've written so many middle grade books over the years, finding and creating some character very distinct. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think with every book it's not it is a challenge, primarily because they have to ring true. They have to be characters in their own right. And i um, I think that with all of them, like with Memo, for example, I constantly wondered at the courage she had,
Mm.
because I felt that I could empathize with her when it came to the feeling that she wanted to tell stories. In my case, yeah, telling stories, writing stories. But after that, to have the courage to run through jungles, and the courage to land up in a school that where she knows no one, and then to sort of establish herself and become so popular. I was constantly amazed at her inventiveness, at her resourcefulness.
Mm.
The Ranima also was, the Rani Renu Mata. Yeah, she was also an interesting person, because I wasn't thinking of her as a completely right or completely wrong person, a black or white person. I think that she is a representation of what we all are, that we are a mix of all of these things. So we do what we think is the best. And perhaps, if we have the wisdom like her to look back at what we have done and wonder whether it was the right decision, I think that is the best thing. So Rani Renu Mata does do that. I think Joshima was an interesting character, because she just, in so many ways, she was so open to embracing all the children who were left to her. And at the same time, she was also sort of very loyal to the queen, to Rani Renumata, and she was very certain that you have to follow these rules. So each of the characters, I think they are created based on what the story wants, what the story needs. So I don't really stop and wonder whether they are different from others. I look at my entire story to see if I have done justice to the idea that I had in my head. And that's how I go about it.
Right. So let's start talking about your other book from Hachette, The Happiness Train.
Yeah.
This also has royalty and this has a Raja. So tell us more about this. Can you hold the book?
Yeah, I have it right here. So this book came out a year back, and it's called The Happiness Train. And the inspiration for this book was very interesting because I love traveling by trains, and I've spent a lot of my son's summer vacations traveling by trains. And I was sitting in the train, and I looked out and I saw another train which had lots of designs on it. So for someone like me who's grown up traveling in boring, dark brown trains or later blue trains, this was the Indian Railways was trying out. I think they were advertising or they were doing something, and I thought that it looked like such a happy train, and that's where the idea came from. And then of course I had to sit down and ask myself, why was this the happiness train? And then I came up, I knew I didn't want it to be a contemporary story. When I asked myself all these questions, what emerged was a story that is set in the early days of independent India in a little village called Manakpur, where a train that comes regularly is the weekly train, but another train which comes is what the children Suraj and Radha call the happiness train, because it comes with lots of people who come to entertain and dance. And so this time Suraj feels that if he doesn't go away on the train, he's going to regret it for the rest of his life. So here I think, my idea was that how all of us are always looking for happiness. We're always convinced that happiness has a different address from the one we live at. We're always looking for some other place to be, someone else to be, some different look for ourselves in order to be happy. And Suraj is that boy who goes looking for that happiness. So the book follows Suraj and his the friends he makes on the happiness train, and how they discover that everything is not the way it appears to be, which is, I think, true for all of us. We go with the outward gloss today more so than ever before. We look at the life that we see of others reflected on social media, and we believe that is the truth. So what does Suraj find when he sets out on the happiness train? Does he find the happiness that he's in search for, or what? So that is what was behind the story.
I love the dacoits that you had created for the book. You don't see them in books anymore. I've not come across dacoits in the recent books.
I think what happens is when you're writing a story, if you allow yourself to think that, but nobody is doing this now, I think we take fright at that. So here in both of these books, I sort of let the story take me where it wanted me to. And I found that all these characters came in. And that they were doing all of these things. And then I realized that the characters themselves, like Radha, I think is one of my more interesting characters, because she represents the way a girl child is brought up in India, and all the limitations that a girl child has to go through. And I think it's true of girl children, even today in India. So I was very happy to create her. I was very happy that she came up in, and I think girls have a way of doing things unobtrusively, whereas boys are all about making a lot of noise. So I use that as a way to contrast Suraj and Radha, and to create this quest for happiness that they find themselves embroiled in.
I thought Radha was ahead of the time. She's bold. Be it the way she talks, or the body language and the spontaneity in just going ahead and doing stuff that she wants.
I think there have been a lot of such women. We just haven't read their stories. So I'm making it my business to write their stories.
So more stories out there to be discovered.
Yeah, definitely.
So what else do you want to share with our readers about these two books? We're running short.
Nothing. I think they're just fun reads that are very different, I think, from each other, even though they came out like sort of one after. They're both for the same age group, but I think that they're very, very different kinds of books, and they're books that I absolutely enjoyed writing. I mean, I really enjoy writing anyway, but these books really help me understand that very often the stories and the characters that you imagine, they do take on a life of their own, and they go to places that you would perhaps as a writer yourself have not had the courage to go. And I think at some such times it's necessary to take their lead, to follow them, and to see what new adventures and what new treasures you can find.
Yes. So 2 new books, 2 different adventures. Do read them. They are definitely wonderful reads. Thank you so much, Nandini. Thank you.
Thank you.